again to The Truth is Viral. I'm Bob Powell, and I am doing my absolute best to make the sense out of this crazy world that we live in so that I can share what I've observed with you. Now, of course, the views and opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of the above network or any person other than myself. Now, this is one of my favorite books. This is the Federalist Papers. It's part of a Time Life collection called The Classics of Conservatism, and it's one of my most prized possessions. I've had it for over 35 years, and in it, writing as Publius in number 47, James Madison proclaims, "The accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary, in the same hands, whether of one, a few, or many, and whether hereditary, self-appointed, or elective, may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny." Now, you heard a spokesman for the ACLU proclaim Obama to be judge, jury, and executioner right here on this program just a few weeks ago. You do the math. Do we live in a constitutional republic, or is this a tyranny? But it looks like war with Iran is a foregone conclusion. For the last 2 months, the U.S. aircraft carrier John Stennis has been plying the waters of the Arabian Sea all by herself, but the USS Carl Vinson has joined her in the 5th Fleet's area of responsibility. 2 carriers represent a formidable force projection all on their own, but when you add the USS Abraham Lincoln into the mix, as the Navy has just done, along with a French aircraft carrier and Britain's top-of-the-line destroyer, the HMS Daring, well, now you're talking about some serious firepower. And let's not forget about America's submarine fleet either. It's out there too, with each boat capable of firing dozens of cruise missiles each hour. Now, it's fairly obvious that a covert war with Iran is already taking place. Mysterious explosions have destroyed Iranian nuclear facilities, and key members of the Iranian nuclear program have been assassinated. All of this points to the handiwork of Mossad. But even the most optimistic observers have stated that the best Israel can hope to do now is slow the Iranian program down. Out in the open, on the diplomatic front, the Obama administration and U.S. allies are hoping against hope that a new round of economic sanctions targeting Iran's ability to sell its oil will topple the government from within. For their part, the Iranians have remained defiant. They're boasting that their recent naval exercises scared the U.S. out of the Persian Gulf. Their threats to close the Straits of HORMUZ in response to the new sanctions sent the price of gas that I pay up by 30 cents a gallon. According to the Iranian news agency Fars, Iranian Defense Minister Ahmed Vahidi said that in the next few weeks, Iran will hold another naval exercise that they're calling the Great Prophet, the largest in its history. And it just happens to coincide with anti-missile drills being run in a joint U.S.-Israeli war game called Austere Challenge 12. And that, my friends, is where I'm going to transition into what this week's report is all about, the National Defense Authorization Act. Section 1031 of the National Defense Authorization Act declares the United States to be a battlefield in the war on terror, and it allows the U.S. military to arrest any American citizen without a charge and detain them indefinitely without a trial, even transferring them to foreign soil. It's not only frightening to think about, but former Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Charles Krulak, and General Joseph Hoare, another 4-star Marine Corps general, wrote in a New York Times op-ed that this treasonous law gives a posthumous victory to Osama bin Laden. Now, voters in the great state of Montana have launched a recall petition aimed at both of their senators and a representative that voted for NDAA. You go, Montana! In fact, with a 13% approval rating, what in the hell are any of our congressmen and senators good for? I say throw all the bums out of office. Start fresh. All it takes for the price of gas to jump up 30 cents is one unremarkable statement from an Iranian general. So what do you folks think is going to happen when a real-life shooting war with Iran breaks out? Prices are going to skyrocket. Out of all of the threats the Iranians have made over the years, the one that I'm confident they can pull off is closing the Straits of HORMUZ. 15 million barrels of crude oil are carried by huge tankers through the Straits every single day. That's about 1/5 of the world's oil supply. ZeroHedge.com estimates that the closure of this waterway, even for a short time, could double oil prices to $200 a barrel. And what happens if a critical pipeline somewhere far away from the Persian Gulf is attacked in a man-made disaster, further strangling the flow of oil? IRGC agents are known to be spread throughout the globe, and they could very easily bomb pipelines, oil refineries, or even offshore oil rigs to squeeze us even more. Or, since the objective of the Obama administration seems to be the total economic collapse of this nation, perhaps a false flag to get things going. I wouldn't put anything past these scumbags. Now, either way, can you afford gasoline when it's $10 or $15 a gallon? Can you pay $1,500 a month for heating oil? I know that I can't. The price of everything's going to soar, even necessities like bread and milk. Basically anything that people have to buy in a store, because the trucking companies that transport the goods will have to pay the $10 or $15 of gas themselves. And that cost is going to be ultimately transferred to you, the consumer, in the form of higher prices. If you think grocery bills are high now, wait until a loaf of bread costs $6, a gallon of milk $8 or $9. You'll be sending your kids to school with a $10 bologna sandwich and a $4 Twinkie, if you're lucky. And that is why the NDAA was passed, because when war breaks out with Iran, our already fragile economy is going to crash and burn on a scale that will make the Great Depression seem like the good old days. And people are going to be out on the streets looking for a little payback. The Occupy protests were nothing but a dry run for both sides. People are already mad as hell at our government, but when they find that they can't feed their families, I guarantee you that there will be violence and blood in the streets. And with the United States being the home of the Second Amendment and 300 million weapons residing in the hands of gun owners, they'll get it. Now, a lot of the people that are going to be staging these protests are police officers and members of the National Guard who depend on a paycheck that doesn't come from Uncle Sam. They have to pay bills, they have to feed their kids just like everybody else. The government needs to be able to order the military to arrest and detain anyone who would pose a threat, because they won't be able to count on what's left of the law enforcement community. Now, if you've ever played Dungeons and Dragons as a kid, and I'm willing to bet that there are a lot more of you than are willing to admit it, then the powers that be would be what we call lawful evil. Even though what they do is evil, no doubt about that, they also need it to be legal. Somehow in their twisted, sick little minds, slavery and murder are okay as long as it's legal. They've been planning this for a very long time, and they've used a long string of puppet presidents to subvert the Constitution with a series of executive orders. Now that the president has granted himself the authority of life over death, as we saw in the extrajudicial killing of Anwar al-Awlaki, the only thing left to do was provide him with the muscle to extend that power over all of us. Now, who needs a little thing like the Constitution when they have all the power they need in the form of executive orders that allow the government to take over the media by controlling the airwaves and internet with SOPA and PIPA and the internet kill switch? They can commandeer all modes of transportation, including your personal vehicle, all sources of energy production, your garden, even your home. They can turn you into a slave, literally, by forcing you into work brigades under government supervision. They can force you to take vaccinations against your will and indoctrinate your children to be better slaves. Of course, when slaves they've got to have somewhere to live, they've got to have some type of shelter, right? Well, that's where the FEMA camps come in. Guess who just bought XE, formerly Blackwater? Monsanto. Talk about unholy alliances, Batman. Private armies like XE and KBR are soliciting bids to construct even more camps than what have already been exposed on the internet. They've been hiring internment specialists, guards drawn from the ranks of former military that are nothing more than mercenaries when you get right down to it. Once the military arrests you, they turn you over to these Defense Department goons, these contractors, and you become a number, chattel, property of the state to do with what it pleases. Gee, I wonder what Ron Paul has to say about this.
We have now institutionalized and codified martial law. Right now, the battle against terrorism involves all of us. Everybody in this country is a potential terrorist. And the words that they use in there to bring everybody in as a potential terrorist is any associated forces, which means that if you happen to visit a website, happen to attend a meeting, happen to do one association, you can be accused of being a terrorist, and the bill says you have no right to a lawyer.
I don't know what difference it makes, since you'll have lost all of your constitutional rights anyway. But the next piece of treasonous legislation to come out of the House of Representatives is the Enemy Expatriation Act. That's H.R. 3166, sponsored by Chucky Dent from the great state of Pennsylvania. This act is meant to add engaging in or supporting hostilities against the United States to the list of acts for which United States citizens can lose their nationality. So I guess to add insult to injury, after you're arrested for no reason and held without trial, you're stripped of your citizenship. And then what? Some of the theories are almost too terrifying to contemplate. Not since 1941, when we had just been attacked by the Empire of Japan, has the Constitution been so horribly disregarded. American citizens have been rounded up and put into prison camps before. The last time, it was people of Japanese ancestry. Now, it seems that the targets are anyone who dares to speak out against the government. The mainstream media is controlled. We all know that. It's a fact. It doesn't matter if it's MSNBC or Fox. It doesn't matter if they're left or right. They both spin the same BS. They just spin it a little bit differently. And they ignore the real news. Case in point, the coverage of Ron Paul, or lack of coverage of Ron Paul. Now, the internet, though, has given rise to a new type of information sharing. Bloggers, freelance and citizen journalists, and even forums like Above Top Secret have been spreading the truth to a public that is becoming increasingly aware, free from the constraints of a globalist agenda. Now, specifically, the Department of Homeland Security announced in November that it's going to target news anchors, journalists, reporters, and anyone else who may use traditional and/or social media in real time to keep their audience situationally aware and informed. And they're going to do that so that they can collect their personal identifying information. To what end? I don't know if you noticed or not, but in much of the footage of the Occupy protests, you can see police officers taping the protesters back. Every phone call that you make, every fax that you transmit, every email that you send, every search term that you enter into Google or Bing goes through the NSA's Echelon program, where supercomputers scour incomprehensible amounts of data for whatever the government's looking for. Every single post that you have ever made on any forum on the internet has been logged, cataloged, cross-referenced, and filed for later retrieval. Now, if you're anti-abortion, you're on a list. If you're anti-war, you're on a list. If you care about the environment, you're on the list. If you support the Constitution, oh boy, especially if you support the Bill of Rights, are you on a list? If you have a Ron Paul bumper sticker, guess what? You're on a list. If you've ever taken a stand or donated money to anything, you're on somebody's list somewhere. Now, the Department of Homeland Security's list of who might be an extremist is so broadly written that anybody could be classified as a terrorist, even poor old Emily Six here. And once you are, guess what? Forget about a lawyer, forget about a judge or a jury. The government can do anything they want with you, including send you to another country and torture you. And they don't even have to tell your family that they have you. We're all in this together, my friends. And it's time to decide whether we're going to sink or swim. Do we want to be a slave, or are we going to fight back? Now, the next week on The Truth is Viral, I'm going on the road to see what kind of trouble I can get into. Come along with me as I lay out the end game. So, until next week, thank you for watching The Truth is Viral, right here exclusively on Above Top Secret. My name is Bob Powell, and as always, Semper Fi. Hoorah.
Smack, run, with alibis. Smack.